Okay, I believe we're all set. Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Dolce, and I'm an attorney here with Milestone. It is my distinct pleasure to have my friend, colleague at points, um, marketing professional Luke Russell on with us today. Many of you probably know him. He runs probably the best, I think I can say the best, long form format for interviewing attorneys and other professionals in the legal space that I have seen. It's a great podcast. You should definitely check it out if you haven't already. He also runs a wonderful marketing company that really is able to take the cake when it comes to turning a firm around or widening a focus or doing more in more places. It's my pleasure to welcome in Luke. We're going to do a short little interview to get more of his expertise. This is something that you can enjoy during your lunch break or your afternoon while sitting at your desk. It's also something that you may want to take notes during. Luke is a consummate professional, and he always has pearls of wisdom to give. The other point that I want to make is that you can ask questions. On the right side of your screen, you'll see a little question box. You ask those live, I will ask them live. So please give us your questions. We'll give as much time as we have allotted to us, which is pretty much all afternoon. I got to wake up I have a toddler waking up from a nap soon. You'll see him in the middle of my family vacation. But without further ado, Luke, do you want to take a few minutes to introduce yourself or say anything positive or negative? You say negative too.
Yeah, it seems like a dangerous thing to just give me a microphone and no parameters. I here's a thought I have that I would love to open with everyone is I think so I've been in this space for 11 years with PI firms, and if anybody's like, man, you look really young, Luke, you're like, yeah, I started in the PI space when I was 10, so that puts me at 21. I have a really dry sense of humor, but so I've been in this space for 11 years. I've worked as a director of marketing for a national law firm, and I've worked with a lot of lawyers, talked with a lot of lawyers. And one of the things I've just come in front of so many times is how there's this frustration, I think, amongst a lot of people that's like, man, like there's no like, give me the formula for marketing my law firm. Just like, can you just tell me? Because it seems like lawyer after lawyer is like, I look out and I see this lawyer do it one way, but when I try that for me, it doesn't produce the same results. If I go hire your SEO agency that did well for you out in, Orlando, and I'm over here in San Diego, the same SEO firm might not get me remotely the same results. If I try TV, it might work in my market, but not yours. And there's just so much frustration that I have heard from lawyers of like, man, like, why is this so effing hard? And I don't have any, I wouldn't say I have any positive, no, it's really not that hard. I'm not going to pretend, I'm not going to placate that, but it's actually like, that's the reality of marketing, is what works for, even for me, like as a marketer, what I've got lots of friends who run agencies, and what works for them doesn't work for me necessarily. Sometimes we collaborate, the same thing works, but a lot of times it doesn't. And so for anybody who ever feels that frustration with marketing, and it's this, there's an endless supply of vendors like me who have something to sell you, and you're like, how am I supposed to pick? And here's what I want to invite people to consider. A few thoughts on this. One is, when you go out and market like somebody else does, you're going to, if you get clients through that method, you're going to attract clients that were meant for that law firm. So if you go out and copy Sam's advertising for your firm, you're going to get clients that Sam wanted. Whereas you might not want those same clients. You might want certain types of people. You might want certain types of claims. And so I really, really just want to invite people, when you think of your marketing, you can just do whatever turns a buck. You can do that. There's no right or wrong here. You can do what other people do. You can also look to have marketing that you like. And personally, as a person who spends a lot of money on advertising my own agency, I would rather like my marketing. And so I think that's what I want to invite people to do. Like a lot of times, anytime I'm speaking and it comes up, I'm like, look, as the person who makes a living off of social media advertising, if you hear this and you're like, oh my gosh, one more thing for me to do, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do social. You don't have to do TV. You don't have to do SEO. You don't have to do anything. Some people, I have friends who have built extremely profitable practices off of print newsletters. Okay. Like I know people who built it off of referrals, people who built it off of TV. So for the people who feel frustrated with the marketing, is give yourself space to recognize it's not just you. And then also just an invitation to think about marketing through the lens of like, what's going to feel good and be fun for you. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to market, it's going to take resources, whether it's your own time or money. And I'm a
So
fan of
Luke,
like, have a good time with it.
I just want to build off of that, right?
Yeah,
And I've been watching a great interviewer lately, who has last name Russell, first name Luke, who is able to pin people down on comments. So I want to try to do the same here,
great.
but with all the love in my heart, right? So we're talking in these large concepts, and then you're bringing in actual specific case examples, right? Could you talk to those specific case examples a little bit more? Like the firm that's actually, doing practices that are considered outdated, but they work for that firm, or the firm that's applying their own personality to their social media marketing spin, right? These are different concepts you were just talking through. I mean, don't say any names, obviously, but could you kind of talk through some of the strategies that you're seeing being done in the space, with a little
Yeah.
bit of specificity?
Yeah, so let's go on one end. I have friends and clients who run your, multi-million dollar billboard, TV, radio kind of buys. And there's just like certain types of people run that, and it's a lot of times it's a volume game. And that's whereas, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're not really necessarily looking for a person who's a little more choosy with their marketing, or maybe there's also, frankly, a lot of a lack of minority representation of many types. So that looks like, I have clients who are African American or Asian American or LGBTQ, and that's like a forefront of their marketing to say like, hey, here's who I am. I want to help people like me. Doesn't mean I won't help people that don't look like me or don't have my lifestyle or have my lived experience, but that's one way. And so, for example, I have a client out of Phoenix, Scottsdale, and his name's Byron Brown. And I love using him as an example because anybody who's seen his ads never forgets him. And he's the anti-lawyer lawyer. And Byron's, he's tatted from neck to toe, and he's a buff guy, biker, looks like, I mean, he lifts. You look at him, you're like, you look like a biker. You don't fit the lawyer stereotype. And Byron's really leaned into that. And there's a lot of people who come into his office and never would have felt comfortable going into another lawyer's office. And so part of what that represents is like Byron's getting clients who might not ever hire a lawyer. And the reason is because they see the traditional injured, call me now. And you're like, oh, like in the very clean suit, and like I'm professional and serious. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're like, hey, I'm a really serious person and I take serious cases, that's cool. I'm just never going to hire you. And there are people who wouldn't hire Byron because they're like, oh, my lawyer shouldn't have tattoos. Okay. Byron's like, I don't care. Like, go hire the other lawyer. But so like Byron is then able to get, like, because we've sat over dinner and talked about this, of how he's able to get clients who really like appreciate him as a human. And it's also those people who feel less, comfortable. And like Byron is a guy who's tatted, there's people have opinions and stigma around that. And so Byron's going to have been on the same receiving end of that social stigma. So like there's just this beautiful, when you're like, hey, this is who I want to be in my marketing, you're probably going to attract people you enjoy being around more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like, but for some people, this is not about that. This is about like, I'm just trying to do numbers. And if you're just going numbers and you don't care, like that's fine. But I just think there's a lot of people like Byron who really lean into that personality and reap the rewards of it. It's just there's less of a blueprint if you're doing that, than if you just want to try to go take over market, with a 7-8 figure traditional marketing buy.
So I know you know the blueprint, and we can get to the blueprint in a little bit. But do you have any tips for those that are trying to do that, individual, the marketing that leads into the individual characteristics, right? Like, so my first thought went to an attorney that I know who once told me, I'm not doing any of the emotional mumbo jumbo. I'm a locked box. I'm a steel cat. You'll never get through it, right? And I was like, that right there, that is your persona. That is your pitch. You will reach a lot of people with that. You're like the classic, like stern, serious type of lawyer. Where I've met other attorneys, as you've mentioned, they have their own distinct characteristics, right? That they want to make a forefront of their marketing. What are some tips for those who want to go down that path or considering going down that path and may have never done that before? They were doing the classic blueprint before. Now they want to do some more individual circumstances.
Yeah, so for one thing, I think it's based on what I've seen, so I've gone through this process myself of going from like what I would say of advertising us as a traditional agency to leaning much more into our like my own unique personality as well as like as a company. But the hard part is like you look out and you go like how what's the best way to do this? And as a lawyer, you look out and you see people who run the traditional campaigns, and then you see people like Byron who are on the other end of the spectrum who are running much more personality driven campaigns. And what I would do is first make sure, I'm always a fan of ever keeping your light bill on, or your light bill paid, your lights on, whatever. And it's because so like if you're like, hey, look, we need cases now, how do we do this? And it's like go out, do PPC. If you're hiring a pay-per-click vendor, and it's depending on what types of practice areas you're doing. I primarily work with PI, and so with that, if you're thinking like it's 1,500 or 2,500 in your market to get a case, like it's not people's favorite way to get a client, but it works for a lot of people. And so like doing those things that are just going to go out, it might be generic, but it can keep the cases coming. I would not recommend anybody just like ignore all of that unless they're comfortable for it. And I want to use Byron as another example, just because Byron very much went all in on himself, and he tells a story. If anybody wants to hear it, I don't know what Byron's episode number is. He was in season 1, somewhere around episode 8, 9, 10. And what was interesting about it, like Byron shares a story of how he was starting his own law firm. He found an agency he wanted to hire. He was going to have to cash out his 401k and just put every single penny into this. And it was like if the commercial campaign hadn't worked out, who knows what Byron would be doing. And so that's partly why I also love to be advice caution of like just regular, like just because it worked for Byron doesn't mean you go out and you cash in your retirement account and it's going to work for you. I'm like, oh, like I'm a huge fan of taking risk, but also a huge fan of like, if you don't want that, don't do it. And
Luke,
so like Byron,
this is part of the reason why I want to talk to you, right? Because there's a lot of salespeople in this space, and there's a lot of people who will deliver really crisp sales pitches. And for you to be out here cautioning people like, oh no, don't spend money, right? Like it's the doer, right? You're the one actually doing the work and on the ground. And I just wanted to highlight that. So please continue. I cut off your string of thought. I apologize.
No, it's I just think it's so important because I think there's ways to like step into it. I think you can go like Byron and just cannonball off the diving board and be like, I'm in. And if you want to do that, like I'm fully supportive of that. We've made a lot of pretty aggressive marketing choices to say like, we're going to do this. Sometimes it doesn't make financial sense short term, but we're also like, even look at our podcast, Lawful Good. I went into this with a 3 to 5 year view on that. This is about a 6-figure investment for us on an annual basis. And we've had a couple clients come through it. And so it's not too bad, but it's, lets us making a statement about who we are in the legal space. But what we didn't do is stop doing everything else. So like for us as an agency, we're still going to show up to a lot of the traditional conferences. We still do our own advertising online. We sponsor organizations like Trial School and this and that. We do all the, like what you would say would be a standard way to show up as an agency. But then we also said, not only do we want to do a podcast, but how do we take our values and weave that in so that people then get to know us as powerful storytellers of human connection. And so that's one way to think, is like, look at your marketing and be like, some of it just can be a little like, well, maybe we want to start working this in, just have some pages on your website. It doesn't have to. Maybe you just start like, maybe you start with your bio and write a bio that feels like really yours rather than what the SEO company wrote. And then still have your SEO company optimize it, but write it to sound like, yeah, like this is who I am. And I think you can, just wade into the pool and also send out, and I will say this, my recommendation to any law firm, this is probably, I think, one of the most universally missed opportunities in the PI space, because that's what I can speak to, and mass torts, which is even worse, is email marketing. It is one of the most least expensive tools that you can use as from a marketing standpoint, because it doesn't massively increase in cost. So what I mean by that is I recommend everybody just send out a monthly email newsletter. And I don't even sell this service, okay? So I'm not even like, this is not my pitch to call me. I'm happy to tell you who to hire. But like, that's a little thing that if you're like, oh man, how can I start being me, but I don't really want to mess with what I've got in my marketing, from what your ecosystem. Email marketing is cheap. You go out, get $100 account through a reputable company like Infusionsoft, Keep, or I don't really love MailChimp, but anyways, there's all kinds of accounts you can use. And you go out and you set that up, take your clients, your past clients, people who contacted your firm but didn't retain you, and just send them a monthly thoughtful email newsletter. Maybe this is where you can start to inject your personality. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to go change your TV, you don't have to go change your pay-per-click ads, you don't need to go change your website. But if you say like, how can I start to transition and see like, what's that like? And then you can also, the thing I love about email marketing is you're not paying to send the email, you're paying to have the account on a monthly basis. So if you send a monthly email, you just, whether you have 100 people on it or 1,000 people on it, it's a way for you to start saying, here's who I am as an attorney, as a law firm, here's how we want to show up in our community. I think that's a low risk, low cost way. It takes effort still. Like it's not, I don't want to pretend like this is like, oh, it's easy, just throw it in. Like I don't even always consistently send these, and I'm the marketer. So, but yeah, that's one way I think people can start to step into this without having to leap, because I don't think everybody, and also the other thing is like, when people use anecdotal examples like Byron, as much I love Byron, he's an amazing human being. He's a really good lawyer, he's thoughtful. But here's the thing, just because it worked for Byron doesn't mean it'll work for you. I don't love when marketers get on and they're like, listen, this worked for so and so, hire me, it'll work for you. And that's not always true. That's like that's the truth of marketing, is you can take the same thing that worked for Sam in Buffalo, New York, and apply it in Charleston, South Carolina, and it can flop. So that's I have a beef with marketers in general who are out like just using their own evidence and ignoring the fact that there's always risk in marketing. But anyways, who knows what kind of tangents and rabbit holes we're going down now.
Well, no, so I kind of want to start to gather some of those rabbit holes, right? And I think a lot of what you're saying is true, and I've seen this in my own life practice. Like the Dolce firm in Western New York, you will not go to a work site in Western New York and not see one of the firm T-shirts. Every worker will be wearing a Dolce firm or Dolce Pinto T-shirt, every single one, and that is their only form of marketing. They don't do any TV, any ad. They run a great, large, successful firm. Right, so like everyone needs to find what works for them. My real next question though is, you've had success, and you have no idea I'm about to ask this, but you have had success from specific campaigns. I've talked to attorneys around motorcycle cases. I've talked to attorneys like in preparation for this. I've talked to attorneys around other sorts of personal injury practices that wanted to expand their practice. They wanted to go into new areas. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how you kind of help them, guide them along that path to see that there could be another segment to their business?
Are you specifically asking like how we help lawyers with that, or just are you talking more abstract? What's
I want to start at the abstract and then get into what you're actually doing as part of it.
Yeah, so I think when people are wanting to explore different practice areas, one of the things to just question, I think, is like, do we have the resource, like the understanding of these case types? Because what's interesting is like for like look at motorcycles, I have lawyers who love us and they hire us for stuff. They're like, oh, I don't like motorcycle cases, and they have an explanation as to why, whereas other people love it. But I think I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, is like take on the kind of cases you want. to work with as a law firm. If you really like, everybody has more fun when everybody enjoys the work they're doing. And this might sound really intangible, and that's this is advice isn't for everybody, but it's when you get it really in alignment, like with who are we as a law firm, who are we as a business, and who do we want to serve, it becomes really easy to make these choices. Well, who we want to serve is really relevant to birth injury cases. Okay, great. Let's look at what do we need to know on that? Do we want to start with co-counsel so we're not worried about the litigation side, or do we think we have what we need to approach these? So I'm a big fan of that. There's so many different like consultants out there that can help you through that process, so you can make your own decisions there. But once you think like, okay, I want to market for different cases, it comes down to like, how do you want to do that? Do you want to go traditional routes? Do you want to go which would be just your regular, like your PPC, or have your SEO team start hustling that path? Or do you want to have, hire a social media vendor like us? Or do you want to go even do like a mailing campaign or t-shirts, which I love that example, Sam, because it's just it's ridiculous. Like if you were to tell most of us that, hey, our only marketing program is t-shirts, it sounds ridiculous.
T-shirts, coffee, and donuts. They drop them off at work sites across the county.
I love that so much. As a marketer, it's just so delightful. But like once you figure it out, it comes down like, how do you want to get these cases? Is this a short-term thing? And if you want short-term, it's PPC, doing like, key radio or television. There's a lot of, I would go to the traditional routes if you want things on the short term. What we do is much more of a long-term approach, and this is where, again, why it's not for everybody, but it also, what it allows you when you take a long-term approach is it leaves you not having to necessarily even have all the internal infrastructure to handle a bunch of cases of a certain type. And so if you take the long-term approach, you can say like, hey, I want these cases in 2023, 2024, but I'm not worried about like being inundated today. And so when you take that kind of approach, you can start building your reputation without having to even fully commit overall, if that's what you want. I don't know how well I feel like I'm existed pretty abstract there for you, Sam. How do you?
No, but I mean, could you bring it in a little bit just so I don't know what social media marketing is.
Yeah.
Can you get me into some of like the nitty gritty of, so you have the personality, you have the individual, you've talked through, okay, now we want to work together. What does that process look like, right? Is it a meeting where they're bearing their soul to you, right? And telling you everything about themselves, and then you're turning that into a social media message? Like what is this? What is this process, and how does it take place?
So let me hold, before I answer that, let's zoom out on the fact that most of people, like, I'm going to specifically be speaking to PI lawyers here, because again, that's the majority of what we do. We do mass torts as well. I don't know if there's anybody in here who's like maybe in like criminal or family law. So this will be somewhat applicable, but conceptually think like most people spend their lives not needing a PI lawyer. And further, most people assume they'll never need one. So even if they see your ads, there's no real, most PI lawyers, what I would suggest that they're doing in their marketing is they are branding PI lawyers as a whole, not themselves. Because all of these messages sound the same, and you might be like, no, ours is different. And I'm like, look, but if you weren't in this industry, you can't see the nuance. Like if you take me to the MoMA in New York, I've had connoisseurs take me on tours, and I look at this stuff, I'm like, this is cool, but I don't have an appreciation for the nuance. The consumers in America, it's if it's like, I help people after an accident, they're like, I've heard your story a million times, and they don't know the difference. And so there's no that's not bad, but what you're doing is your lawyers are really just saying, hey, when you're in this tiny little moment after being injured, call us. Well, who's us? Which lawyer? In my backyard, when I drive down the interstate, there's really lawyers who own every other billboard. There's a couple of guys who have like 2 billboards along the stretch, but at the end of the day, it's all the same. And so there's this, but what you're doing is you're competing. People go through their life, they're living, and then all of a sudden an accident happens, and there's this minuscule, when you think about their lifespan, minuscule window where they were just injured, they have a claim, and they haven't retained a lawyer. That's a really small window. So when you think about marketing to those people, just in general, from a supply and demand standpoint, when you go to advertise and you want to advertise to that person, you're advertising in the most competitive space available. That's why if you want to go on and compete for keywords on Google, like, car accident lawyer San Diego, you might spend two, three, four, or $100 or more for a click, because everybody wants that person, that tiny little window. And so what you're doing is you're literally saying, I'm going to go out and get the most expensive customer on the planet. Now, that's not that, again, I'm not saying it's wrong, and what I definitely encourage lawyers is keep that in there, because it's that diversifying your marketing spend, just like you diversify your stock portfolio and your investments. This is the same idea. Like, have those short-term things. If you are comfortable with your costs on pay-per-click, keep doing it, but you're only advertising to people in the most expensive time possible. Whereas, contrast that to t-shirts and donuts and coffee, you're advertising to people where there's really nobody advertising, of like, hey, we're here to hang out, we're with you, we've got your back. And that kind of marketing is to the people who, well, they might not ever need a lawyer, but they, here's good people who care about me, care about what I do and the work I do. And I would imagine there's probably at least somewhere in the space a little bit of a discussion and understanding of like, well, when there's injuries on the workplace, these are the people to call, but we're here because we've got your backs. We value you as workers in America. We value you as workers in Buffalo. We value, like, there's just so many aspects of saying, like, we're here. You're not saying injured on the job site, call us now. You're saying, hey, we're here, and you're building a relationship. And so from a social media standpoint, what we do specifically is we take that same idea of how do we build and foster a relationship long before they ever need a lawyer. So because that's when there's the least amount of competition. Lawyers aren't out there going, hey, we've got your back. We actually would love to help you prevent an accident. In fact, in order to prevent an accident, or at least to prevent being taken advantage of, here's good information. So when we'll do things like, you mentioned our motorcycle campaign, that's the one we've been doing for 6 years. And what we do is we go out to platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and we say, hey, we have this free content. It's like, I forget exactly which one it is. We have a few different ones we use, but it's like, 5 mistakes to avoid after a motorcycle accident. And we talk about, safety, but it's about taking pictures, the insurance adjuster, maybe don't go signing stuff. And we're actually providing people information that is useful today. Injured call me now is only injured, or only helpful when I'm injured. It's not relevant. So lawyers are spending all their money to have irrelevant messages, unless you're in that, like, in the most narrow window of your life where you were both injured and have a claim. And because everybody's competing for that, it's just so aggressive. So it's just saying, and again, like I mentioned earlier, this, and I think this guy's no, he's not out of Buffalo. He's out of somewhere in New York, but the opposite side of the state, eastern side. But he's built up a practice solely on referrals from other lawyers and a new print newsletter that he's been doing for years. And I've met multiple lawyers who have built their business. I met a guy, his whole marketing budget, it was like $45,000 a year. It's just a print newsletter. That's it. Now, he didn't have a big practice. If he wanted to scale it up and have 50 attorneys, he's going to have to do more than that. But the point is, it's like there's all this marketing that you can get out in front of people before they need a lawyer and build a relationship. And so I mentioned email marketing earlier. And I know it's 2022. I know it's the age of TikTok influencers. And it seems like, does email marketing still work? And the simple answer is yes. It's not, again, I'm not going to act like this is the magical thing, stop everything else you're doing, but add this in. So like what we do with our clients is we say, hey, for like nursing home abuse, how to spot signs of abuse and neglect. If I have a family member in a facility, that's really relevant to me. It's not about, did mom or dad get injured and are you wondering if they have a case? It's like, hey, here's how to actually be able to be a little bit more knowledgeable of a caregiver to your loved ones. And it's like, oh, well, that's relevant today. And then we say, okay, we're going to send you an email every week. And yes, I said every week. And where we're going to provide useful information to help you understand abuse and neglect, to help you continue spotting it, to help you understand how us as lawyers help people. How do we help people? How do you get access to the medical care, even though they're already at a medical facility? And so there's so many questions people have that they don't necessarily, well, they don't know the answers. They don't know the questions they should be asking. So with social media, we're just using social media really to drive people off of social media. For lawyers, because then you control the marketing. You don't have to spend much to send a weekly email. You don't have to spend much to send a monthly newsletter. And that's, to me, that's what we use social for. We do drive leads straight off of social as well, but that short-term strategy, because of the social stigma around lawyers, and in particular injury lawyers, we can't take whatever works on TV won't work on social. And so that's why we take this educational approach. We say, hey, we've got good information today, and we want to build a relationship. And so that's what we do.
That's incredible, Luke. And we're going to keep going. We've come up against our half hour, but I want to follow a little bit more on the specifics. So I'm going to keep going. If people have questions, please ask them. I'll be sure to include them into this. But we're going to keep going for a few more minutes. So if people have to drop, that's okay. Just watch like 20 people drop off. But thank you for coming and joining. We still have a few dozen on, so we'll keep going just for a few more minutes. Luke, you're talking about building out those educational materials, right? Who's doing the educating? Are you showing up with a packet and everything's written for the firm, or is the firm coming to the table and saying, these are the points of emphasis we want to educate our client base on? How are those materials created, and then how are they disseminated?
Yeah, great question. So what we do, because from an ability to be a business that both sells something at a price point people can handle and profitable, we build entire campaigns that are basically turnkey solutions. Now we tailor it to every client, but what we've done is we collaborate with law firms to build our materials. So, but then we go to our clients come to us and we say, hey, you want to advertise for TBIs, or you want to advertise for birth injuries or construction accident claims? We basically built a whole ecosystem, but then we tailor it to our clients. And because I think, like, in a perfect world, everything would be custom from scratch. But frankly, the price tag practically has to be 4 to 10 times to be able to actually make it worth somebody else's time to build this. Unless, again, go hire great people, do that. You don't have to hire a vendor. But if you want to have the educational materials, you got to, and anybody who wants to do this on their own, focus on delivering real value to the reader and write to them like they're human. Don't assume.
No, but you guys have already done that. That's what I'm trying
We've
to
already
highlight.
done it.
You guys have taken the time. You've been in the lab. You've
A lot of time.
constructed the 5 things, right? And you're ready to go. And so someone can call you. So somebody called. I'm doing your sales pitch for you because you're not going to do it. And I'll comment on that in a minute. But so pretty much you have to. Someone gives you a call and they can start launching a campaign for birth injury cases on social media in their area that starts driving readership into a monthly newsletter that you can help them create.
Oh yeah. Yep, we do. So like for people who actually are like, hey, this sounds interesting, it's people come to us. Now if they want a new topic, if somebody was like, I want to do boating accidents, it might take us more like 4 weeks to have that kind of thing ready because we got to build it. But if somebody says, hey, I want to run a motorcycle campaign, we can have you ready. If you answer all of our questions, we can have you ready in 3 to 5 business days because we built it. It comes down to let's tailor it to your brand, let's tailor it to your geography, because we have been. And here's the thing. So I got sucked into this legal space because I showed up at some mastermind event for lawyers. I didn't know what PI lawyers were, other than they were ambulance chasers. That's all. That's it. Like that's all I'd ever heard.
Hey,
so it's like,
don't throw those terms around loosely, all right? And that's not well received.
No.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Geez, throwing me off my game, Sam. Like, no, I'm sorry, everybody, you're not ambulance chasers. What's funny is, so I got into this space and I was hired by a law firm to do some work. And I was trying to make them feel good, like they got their investment out of me. And so I started creating some materials that helped push against like these ideas of like the hot coffee story of the McDonald's coffee, pushing against like, just a person was using a ladder and they slipped and then they sued the ladder company. Like, what's up with that? And so I started creating materials about this. And what the reason I bring this up is because for over a decade now, I have been like, what we're great at, and why I really got sucked into this space was because we're good at connecting with people on the humanity of lawyers. Lawyers, like what PI lawyers do, you are literally real life superheroes. Like you are going out and spending your money to acquire people's cases, like to have them retain you, and then you're going to go out and spend your money to fight against a corporation that's kind of like, screw you, little person, I don't need to honor the fact that you've paid for insurance and then you have medical bills, we'll give you $5,000. And it's like, so without the lawyers, like these people wouldn't get anything if they got anything, and insurance companies would have no incentive to ever pay out. And so what I think is so important is like is how can we push against that stigma and change the narrative? And when we write, I don't, look, there are other agencies that probably never miss a comma and never miss, a sentence structure mistake. We'll make those sometimes, but it's kind of like, but what we're incredible at is connecting with people on a human to human basis. And because so much of PI advertising is either in this cheesy realm, and which I want to come back to and mention a thing, or people just don't get it. They don't and because of all the stigma that insurance companies have propagated about these narratives that news organizations have just picked up on, and it's there's so many people out there who need your help who aren't calling, and that's one of the things I want people to hear. And on the cheesy comment, there's some research that was put out a year ago by Pilma, and it talked about they studied consumers and they put them into 3 categories. And what was really important, I don't remember off the top of my head at the moment the stats. What was really important is there was a huge chunk, I think it was 28% of people, and most of these people had retained a PI lawyer in the past, but they thought that they could have been fine without a PI lawyer, that they could have done just as good on their own. And soak that in. So these are people who have hired a PI lawyer and they're still not actually that excited about you. And then there's another group, and if I remember right, it's like 37 or 41%. And that group believes that hiring a PI lawyer means they might be greedy, or that their friends and family will think they're greedy. So when you think about that, and you think about, especially anytime you take traditional PI marketing, you're adding to that. I don't think that's wrong, but you are adding to the entire problem plaguing the legal industry, the PI lawyers, when you use traditional messages. That's my opinion. I guess I can't like qualitatively back that scientifically, but like you're using the same messages that's driving the stigma. But what's important about that for anybody listening is like, how do we want to show up? How do we want to build relationships with people? And it's, you need to connect with people on a human to human basis. And as writers, I think we're great at that. I'm not going to call us the best, because I'm sure there are people who are better than us somewhere, but we're
Luke,
like,
you're losing me on your sales pitches, man. They're really bad. Like, come on, there's
yeah.
better people than me. I mean, come
Well, I
on.
don't know who they are, but I don't like the best. I don't like playing this like we're the best, Sam. I'm like, we're not the only good writers out there. But I will tell you, as a law firm, don't go out and just hire a copywriter, because look, that doesn't mean they're great. Now, if you find a really savvy copywriter, go for it. It's just, I think people underestimate the complexity of writing for especially trial attorneys.
I'll say we don't let just anybody on our weekly discussions. So,
Yeah.
Luke, I want to say thank you. I'm getting someone
Thank
trying
you,
to come to pull the plug. I think we have to do another one of these next month, because we still have people on who probably want to hear more. If you have any questions, please ask them now. And if not, please come again next month when we're gonna have to do this again, because I have like 24 more questions to go through. But I'm getting, they're pulling the plug on us, Luke. And you know me and you, we could probably go all day. So.
Yeah, we'll talk all day. Then we got to talk about dumplings at some point. So yeah,
I'm about to say the reason why this all began. Dumplings at AAJ.
Love it. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on here.
Of course. Thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise. I'm serious. We will have to do another one next month.
Sounds
because
good.
there's a lot we weren't able to